What's going on, everybody? My name is Curci, and I played Bloodborne, and now I want to talk about it. So if you don't know what Bloodborne is a game that is from Software. It is made by the same people who make Dark Souls, and so therefore, very difficult game. About a year ago, I put out a video talking up how much I love Dark Souls and that style of game so much. And I will say that when I beat Dark Souls, I kind of looked back at the game to see if there was anything that I missed, and there were a couple of things, but it wasn't so much that it warranted a new game plus or another run at the game. But still, I wanted more of that feel, so I tried Dark Souls 2. It didn't grab me that much. I know eventually I'll go back to it because I do want to play Dark Souls 3 and I want to play that series in order. People have told me that I can probably skip Dark Souls 2. I still want to give it a shot. But a lot of people kept recommending go play Bloodborne. Bloodborne is amazing. Go play it. So I tried it and I spent about a week in it, maybe a little bit more, and I got stuck around one boss. I overcame that boss, but still the game just kind of fell off for me after that. And I realized in that moment that maybe it was a mistake to go from one From Software game to another. Whenever you play a From Software game, there's a lot of effort that goes into it because it is very challenging, and so you go through a lot of the trials and tribulations that a game like that is going to throw at you with the bosses and overcoming just the little enemies and the environments, or even just figuring out what it is that you're meant to do, because these games are very vague.
Don't think too hard about all of this.
And so now I know that it's probably best for me to put a game that holds my hand a little bit more, maybe focuses more on story, not so much gameplay, and then allow myself to build back up to wanting to play another From Software game again. So finally, recently, I got to the point where I wanted to play Bloodborne again, and so I gave it a shot. And I'll be honest with you, the reason why it took me so long to get back into playing Bloodborne is because I thought that the first time I played the game, I had made significant progress. I spent about a week in that game, and it was very difficult for me to overcome some of the earlier bosses. So it was like that mental battle of, do I just resume the progress that I started and then try to relearn the game when I'm in the middle of it? Or do I just restart, bite the bullet, and then just see how far you can get? Let's try to make up that progress. And I'm big into, if I haven't played a game in a while and I never beat it, you might as well just start over. Because it's really difficult to play a game when you're past the tutorial point, when you forgot how to play. And to be completely honest, it actually took me a couple of days to get back to where I was. And then a couple of days after that, I had completed the game. I rolled credits on the game. So what is Bloodborne? Bloodborne is based in the city of Yharnam, which is inspired by like Victorian London. Beautiful architecture. That's one of the things that is a huge benefit to this game. I actually just stood around looking at the atmosphere way more than I did with, say, Dark Souls. Dark Souls has some beautiful scenery, but just the detail of the buildings in the background that is in Bloodborne, it's so detailed, so well crafted. And it's not even just the city of Yharnam. There are other locations that aren't strictly speaking the city. You'll just be amazed by what's around you. It's a very pretty game. Here's the thing with From Software games. There is a story to Bloodborne, and there's a story to Dark Souls and Dark Souls 2 and everything else that's, From Software, but you gotta find that stuff. You gotta look at item descriptions. You gotta really pay attention to the cutscenes and some of the NPC characters that'll talk to you. But it's like putting pieces of a puzzle together and getting the whole picture. For a lot of people, when you play these games, it's about looking at every single one of the item descriptions. And I'm talking like from your boots to little runes that you find to stupid little things that you'll just throw away because you don't think it's useful. Everything has some degree of lore attached to it, and it's just a bigger piece to this larger puzzle that is the story of Bloodborne. And for some people, that's why they play this game, is that they want to seek out that puzzle and they want to put that puzzle together to understand this world. And so to give you just the cliff notes, because what I do is I go on Google and I find a YouTube video that just gives me in 30 minutes the story explained. But the thing that happened was that the city of Yharnam discovered these tombs that were underneath of it. They found this ancient blood that is basically a cure-all for all disease and sickness. So they founded the Healing Church, which then started using this blood ministration to cure all the sickness and terrible things that were in this world. And so the church became super influential, but it turns out that using that blood on people also makes people turn into monsters. And then it got out of control to the point where they had to organize hunters and then go out on a hunt. And that's what this game is that you're a hunter who goes out and kills monsters. Now, the thing that I will credit Dark Souls for over, say, Bloodborne is that at least in Dark Souls, I knew what I was doing. Even though I didn't know why I was doing it, I didn't really know the general story around it. It took a couple of times of me watching cutscenes to really get the grasp of what they were saying and how they fit into the greater narrative of the game. At least I knew I was ringing two bells, one above, one below, and then you got to go fight all the guys that were in the opening cutscene. Whereas in Bloodborne, they're like, go seek out the pale blood. I beat in the game. I don't know what the pale blood is. I can make a guess, but I don't know if I'm right. It's very vague. And honestly, when you play games like From Software games, you have to understand what it is that you're there to play. Because if you're playing a game because you want to be engrossed in the lore, I guess this game has it, but if you're hoping to be told a story, this isn't the game for you. It's sort of like if you try to play a Telltale game, like The Walking Dead, Tales from the Borderlands, The Wolf Among Us, but you're expecting great gameplay, you picked the wrong game. Understand the game you're playing before you get into it. This is a gameplay-driven experience that is supposed to be very challenging. So let's talk about the gameplay for a second, because the gameplay is the strong suit of Bloodborne. If you ever played Dark Souls, the gameplay is very similar. You got a light attack, you got a heavy attack, and you're mostly dodging. You have to be very careful with enemies. When enemies hit you, they're going to take off a lot of your health. Even if it's not that big of a threat of an enemy, sometimes they're just going to catch you and they're going to embarrass the crap out of you, just like in Dark Souls. So there's a lot of you understanding where the enemies are so that you don't get swarmed by them, because that's the quickest way to die, is that when you take on more enemies than you are able to handle. So understanding how many enemies are in the area, how you tackle certain enemies, and then just a lot of dodging. Don't get hit. And it's the same thing with the bosses. When you go and fight the bosses, it's just understanding the strategy of those bosses, waiting for your right moment to strike, and then capitalizing on it. So there's a lot of time you'll be fighting a boss and you're just watching them like, okay, that attack, that one I can attack him on. And it's just like you get a lucky couple of hits. There'll be points in the game where you'll be going through an area and there's so many enemies and you'll just get hit, and you keep using your blood vials, which is like Estus Flax in this game. It's your way of reclaiming health. As enemies hit you, you have to use those health vials, and then you go less and less, and then by the time you get to the boss, you have a finite number of them. You try to get to the boss with as many blood vials as you can. And the game gives you a couple of opportunities to retain as many blood vials as you can, because first of all, the thing that Bloodborne does that's different than what Dark Souls does is that when an enemy hits you, there's a little bit of a grace period where you're able to hit the enemy back and try to leech back some of your health. Sometimes you can get all your health back, but other times if you get hit again, you're going to lose your opportunity to regain health. So you got to counter quick, but you got to be careful because there are only certain enemies that you're actually able to successfully move in. So some enemies will just hit and then it's just too risky to try to go for another hit. I either have to take a step back and use a blood vial to heal, or I can risk getting hit again and then losing even more health, and then I have to use more blood vials. It's just better to be smarter. But also there are times in the game, like with Dark Souls, where you can find alternate routes forward. So you'll be going through an area and it takes you about 5 minutes to get through an area, only to discover that there's a lift. Then you take that lift and it takes you back to the checkpoint, which are bells, which are like bonfires. Every time you rest at a bell, you have the option to go to the Hunter's Dream, which is like the safe area of the game. It's where you can use blood echoes to level up, increase your vitality or your endurance or your strength, and go to the shop and buy blood vials, antidotes in case you get poisoned, or upgrade your equipment. And blood echoes is like souls for Dark Souls. So you'll go and you'll fight enemies, you'll get blood echoes, and that will be a set of experience points as well as a set of currency. So it has a lot of similarities to Dark Souls, as I've been saying this whole time. But one of the cool things about this game is that your weapons are different. You have a weapon on your right hand and you have a starting weapon. You can choose between one of 3 things. And you also have the option to buy more as the story progresses. Every weapon that you find in the game is going to have 2 modes. It's going to have a light mode and it's going to have a heavy mode. So I use the saw cleaver pretty much the whole time in the game. And it's this weapon that it comes around your arm like this and you just slash enemies and it's super quick. You just go up on your enemy and just slash them to death. You can also switch it to like a longer, heavier attack. So it takes a little bit longer to swing, but it gives you a little bit more range. I did a test with a couple of NPCs and I realized I did less damage when it was in the longer, heavier mode, as opposed to when it was like on my arm and it was a little bit shorter. So the benefit that I saw from that was that when it was in the longer mode, it was giving me the benefit of range, because there were some enemies where I'm like, crap, I just need a little bit of distance between me and them, so I'm going to go with the longer configuration and I'm just going to slash at them as much as I can and then back up and see if I can slash some more. Eventually I played around with a different weapon, which was like a sword that turned into like this big ass hammer, and I needed it because I needed to deal a lot of damage to some enemies in a certain area. So it became very useful on a certain type of enemy in a certain place in the game, and I might have used it a couple of times here and there after that, but I was still going back to the saw cleaver. There are also runes in this game that you can uncover that you can add. It's like perks to yourself. You can add additional blood vials, and it's not like a crazy amount. You don't add like 10, but it'll be like you add like 1 or 2. But it can also be like you increase your stamina, you increase your health. There's a whole bunch of different runes with a whole bunch of different benefits, but you can only equip like 3 or 4 at a time, but you can always switch them out. But on your left hand, you have your option to, you can have a shield, you can have a torch, but you can also have like a gun. I went with the blunderbuss because I was always trying to use it to parry. I just suck at parrying. It's exactly how it works in Dark Souls, where if you time your shield parry right, you could do like a bonus attack. It's difficult in Bloodborne because not every enemy can be parried, but also you don't know what attacks you can or can't parry. I'm gonna be honest, most of the time I didn't even really use the gun, but I went with the blunderbuss because I thought it was easier. Let me talk about the bosses for a second, because I was expecting to play a game that was gonna frustrate me. I don't want to be frustrated, but I wanted to play a game that was gonna challenge me enough, because one of the things that I loved about Dark Souls is that everything felt challenging, but everything felt doable. There was something that disappointed me slightly, ever so slightly, and it might be the only thing I complain about when it comes to this game. Some of the bosses were easy. One of the best things about Dark Souls is that every boss seemed like it had a different strategy. You needed something different. There were things you had to look out for that other bosses didn't have, and that's definitely the case here, but most of the time you could defeat bosses in Bloodborne just simply by running up, sticking to them, getting in as many slashes as you can, and then backing up, wait for like an AoE attack, and then move in and just start hacking them up. That would be cool for maybe a couple of the bosses, but when it's almost every boss, that's when it got a little disappointing for me. I don't want to sound like I'm saying that all the bosses are easy, because they're certainly not. There is one boss in the game where it'll go through 3 phases, and most of the bosses are going to have at least 2 phases. So what I mean by that is when you get their health bar to a certain point, then they're going to switch into a different mode where they're going to have a new array of attacks. There's going to be new threats. There's one boss that will literally heal themselves in the middle of the fight. I don't know. I think I just needed a little bit more challenge. Never did I feel like I was hitting a wall when it came to the bosses. There were like maybe 2 bosses that I was like pulling my hair out, and now I have no more hair. I don't know. I mean, there were a couple of times where I did fight a boss where it was like, I need to learn this strategy because I'll do the most damage if I hit that guy's head. So I have to wait for him to lower himself so I can get a couple of good strikes in. And I would use the longer configuration on my saw cleaver to make up some of that range, because I realized that he didn't have to bring his head all the way down in order for me to get a good hit in. A lot of times you're going to be just fighting enemies and you're just like, I have to kill this thing with bug bites. It's going to take forever, but this is the strategy. But I think more often than I would have liked is that most of the Bloodborne bosses, you just stick right to them, you start slashing at them, you dodge a couple times, and then you do it again. It's not bringing the whole game down, because I think the core game with the enemies is very challenging, especially like enemies that have ranged attacks. There's one area of the game where these enemies will start throwing boulders at you, and if you're not paying attention, it will hit you and it'll take out a massive amount of your health. Most ranged attacks are pretty avoidable if you know they're coming, but you just got to time them right. There's an area of the game, it's very early on, it's sort of like this town square, and there's one guy who's standing on top of a carriage and he has a rifle, and he'll start shooting the rifle at you, and it's fine if you could avoid it, but a lot of times he can reload pretty quick and shoot you again. So what you have to do is you have to draw enemies from the town center and you have to pull them back so that he can't hit you, and it's just super annoying because I know that I could just tear through that area as long as he wasn't there. I guess ranged enemies in Dark Souls sucked as well, but yeah, now in Bloodborne it's like, ugh, especially when you time it wrong and you go for a dodge and they blast you on the ground anyway, and it's like, well, son of a bitch. There's a lot to like in Bloodborne. I loved Bloodborne. What's interesting is that even though I rolled credits on it, because I did beat it a lot quicker than I thought I would, I spent maybe a few days on this game, but I looked back at some videos that ranked all the bosses of Bloodborne from easiest to hardest, and I realized that there were a lot of bosses that I had never seen in the game. And I know I didn't do the DLC, and what's interesting about the DLC is that if I'm playing the game to have a challenging boss fight, I've heard the DLC bosses are notoriously difficult, and I kind of want to play the DLC just so I can have the satisfaction of, yes, I beat those bosses. But I also want to explore all the things in Bloodborne that I had not explored. I know there's like a secret ending to the game, and I kind of want to do that. I don't know if I'll get to the point where I'll be able to finish the game again, but I definitely want to do a new game plus. If I rolled credits on Bloodborne right now, knowing that there was a bunch of stuff that I had missed, and I was just satisfied with that, then I would have a different interpretation of how I felt about this game. But because I have this desire to want to go back into it, because it's the same thing with Dark Souls, when I got to the end of Bloodborne, I just wanted more. And so I looked back and I was like, crap, there's a whole lot more that I didn't do. And so now I actually want to go back and do all that stuff. There's a whole thing in this game that's known as Chalice Dungeons, where you get a chalice in the game, and then there's certain items you can conduct a ritual from the Hunter's Dream, and you will go to like this instance area. Some of it is procedurally generated, but some of them are locked in, like story-driven Chalice Dungeons, and there's a couple of unique bosses within that. That's where most of the bosses that I missed are, because I didn't do any of the Chalice Dungeons. I think I tried it out in my first playthrough, my first run with this game, and I got real confused, like, what is this? What am I doing? Every area looks the same. And so I got annoyed because I didn't understand it, and because I didn't understand it, it didn't feel like a very compelling experience for me. But now I do want to explore it, because it's almost like I have this option for a post-game game where I'm now going to spend most of my time in the Chalice Dungeons, because that's an area that I just did not explore. So I'm interested. Like, this was a great game. I really enjoyed it. I love the environment. The story's there if you look for it. Some of the bosses are really unique, and most of them are fairly the same strategy. That was the one critique that I have for this game, is that some of the bosses can be taken out with the same strategy. It's not that like you could do the same strategy on some of the bosses. You could do that with Dark Souls 2. Why didn't you say that about Dark Souls? It's just that it happened maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 too many times, maybe. maybe. It's literally my only critique, but I love the gameplay. If you're gonna get stuck in this game, it's gonna be when you're going about the areas of the game. There's one area, one FU area. I totally forgot to mention this during the gameplay stuff, but there's occasionally you will find other hunters in the game, not other players, although there is a way that you can play online and other players can invade your game. You can invite your friends to fight alongside you, but there are NPC hunters in the game, and man, are they a bitch sometimes. First of all, there's two places where the hunters were really just killing me over and over and over. There's a guy who's up on a clock tower and he has a machine gun, and it's easy to avoid the machine gun as long as you know where in the area you are vulnerable to the machine gun. So it's easy to draw enemies away from the line of fire from the machine gun, and also it's easy to avoid getting hit by the machine gun. But the problem is that when you climb the ladder to get to the clock tower to fight the guy who's on the machine gun, that guy is just so difficult. I ended up cheesing it at some point where I just ended up kicking him off of the clock tower and beating him that way. But there's another area where you have to fight 3 hunters at once. I tried to draw 1 or 2 at a time and just like try to take them out one by one. Like I drew them out of the room that they were in. I brought them into a new room and I was like, hopefully I have just one of you and I'll just take you out one by one. Because the cool thing about when you kill the hunters, unlike the other enemies in the game where if you were to go to the hunter's dream and return to the world, all of the enemies respawn. It's just like with Dark Souls, and if you ever play Jedi Fallen Order, it's just like that as well. But hunters will not respawn. Once you kill a hunter, it's done. So the strategy of I have to fight 3 at a time, so I'm going to fight 1 at a time, kill 1, so now I only have to fight 2, and then go on from there. But they will pop up occasionally through the game, and they'll pop up when you least expect it. You'll be moving through an area, and you'll see an enemy. That's a freaking hunter. All right, let's go. I think at a certain point, a lot of the hunters became easy because I leveled up my character enough that he was, you know, formidable, and he was ultimately able to handle himself, so it was a lot easier for me to fight against those enemies. Overall, though, I loved Bloodborne. I thought it was a phenomenal game. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the gameplay of it. I wish most of the bosses were a little bit more difficult, but ultimately it was an incredible experience. I am going to be doing a new game plus, and like I said before, if I'm willing to do a new game plus, you know that's a good game. If I beat a From Software game and immediately after beating the From Software game, I go, let's do it again. Let's do all the things that we had missed. Like I said, if I rolled credits on that game and was satisfied even knowing all the stuff that I had missed, then I would probably have a different opinion on the game. But because I want to do a new game plus, I think that speaks volumes about the game itself. So would I recommend Bloodborne? 100% I would recommend it. Absolutely check it out. It's an incredible game. Here's the thing. Understand the game that you're getting into. Don't play this game if you want to be engrossed in the lore, engrossed in a story, and expecting the story to be up front, because it's not. This is a game that is going to challenge you, it's going to test you, and its gameplay is its strength. If you're playing the game for those reasons, then yes, this is a good game for you. So have you played Bloodborne? What did you think about it? What bosses did you get stuck on? Let me know about all this stuff in the comments below. If you like this video, hit the like button. Also consider subscribing. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified on all new uploads. And also consider watching some of these other videos right here. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.